as I look at my reflection in this mirror that's laying across the room, speaking into this beautiful brand new mic that I purchased, I welcome each and every one of you listeners, to episode 5 of the DualShock Graveyard podcast. We finally got ourselves some equipment. This is a very exciting show. In fact, this is actually the biggest show we've ever had. We have a lot of news to discuss, announcements to be made, and one could say that this is a milestone of an episode. In fact, that might be the title of this week's episode. Milestone. Sure, why not? But to new listeners out there, the DualShock Graveyard podcast is a gaming podcast with a horror spin to it. And on the off chance that you're not listening to this on your preferred platform, you should know that the DualShock Graveyard podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn. Last week we announced that we're also streaming on YouTube as well. For the YouTube stream, beginning with this episode, I am including timestamps for the whole show. I'm sure some of you out there prefer not to listen to an hour-long podcast. You just want, you want to see specific topics being discussed. I'm certainly that way, so I provided that for you, starting with this episode. And also, speaking of announcements, my first announcement regarding the show is that we will soon be coming to Twitch. The DualShock Graveyard podcast will be live. Well, I should probably clarify this. Okay, how do I clarify this? So we are, I am going to be recording this podcast on Twitch very soon, but it's not going to be a live podcast per se. How would I even describe it? It's going to be a live stream of me recording a podcast that's not live. In other words, I'll be recording myself recording the podcast, basically. I do take, as much as I would love the podcast to be one full uncut thing, I'm not that skilled yet, but I do take breaks. If I do want to take a sip of water, I do press pause on this thing, take a quick sip. I'm sure none of you want to listen to that. I sure as hell don't when I'm listening to a podcast, but I figured it's going to be me recording the podcast while some viewership watches the live stream and discuss the show amongst themselves. Perhaps maybe between the takes, I could even jump in and talk to some of you guys. But the main gist would be the show being recorded, and then after the show's done recording, I might stick around for a bit longer and just talk to the chat. I figured that sounds pretty fun. The show is still growing. I'm still constructing the foundation of the show, so to speak, and Twitch is the next step after YouTube. The YouTube's already undergoing as well, but again, as I said, the YouTube streams will include the timestamps, and we're moving forward to Twitch. The next announcement is kind of it's a way to kind of challenge myself to improve upon myself. There are many macrocosmic, so to speak, changes to the show as far as like looking towards the future, but I think in order to push myself to better myself, I feel like I should put forth challenges to myself on a microcosmic level, which brings me to this next announcement. From here on out, moving forward, starting with this episode, the DualShock Graveyard podcast will be at least 60 minutes of show, and that's just in the past I've just recorded until I've just run out of shit to talk about, and then I end the show. But again, in order to motivate myself to kind of move the goalpost, to give myself a challenge, I am sticking to a new time, and that is at least an hour. Give myself a challenge again to motivate myself to do better. That's just how I feel I would. I'm just setting challenges for myself to improve the show. But speaking of the show, I believe that does it for the announcements. We do have a lot of topics to talk about. In fact, the very first thing we need to talk about is kind of some breaking / good news for any people out there paying for a PlayStation Plus subscription, you should know this. If you are paying for PlayStation Plus, if you're listening to this in your car, you should probably pull over right now. If you're on your computer, just stop whatever you're doing. You should probably check your email, because for some select PlayStation Plus subscribers, Sony has done you a solid, and you might find 3 months of free Netflix on Sony for free. Every once in a while, Sony throws a bone to their customers. I know I've received some goodies from them. I remember the PS3 era. I think out of nowhere. I think it might have been in response to that time that PSN crashed or was hacked many years ago. I'm sure some of you remember that fiasco. They got hacked and they just froze the system for like a solid month. And I think sometime after that, they did just give I don't know if it was everyone, but they give a substantial number of people just $10 of PSN credit, which was pretty cool. I forget what I purchased with that. But more recently, though, I remember I was subscribed to their cable service. For those that don't know, PlayStation, they have their own built-in cable service into the PS4 called PlayStation View. I was paying for the basic package, and one day they just gave me 3 months of their premium package for free. That was pretty cool. So this is just another example of them just throwing a bone to some people. You know, sometimes they do cool shit like that. But just in case you don't find that email in your email, there actually is a link, or I've tweeted a link to a website, a PlayStation website, where you get to enter. Even if you don't get the email, you can still enter your email to see if you did qualify. Upon me entering my email in big fat letters, I was met with a "you do not qualify for this offer" message, which sucks, you know. But I'm not too upset about that. You know, you can't be that upset about something like that that's just offered for free. But you might be more lucky than me, and you might get yourself 3 months of Netflix for free. If you already pay for Netflix, that doesn't make you ineligible. I believe it's just an additional 3 months added to your current subscription. So if you are a PlayStation Plus member, stop whatever you're doing and check your emails. A little goodie from Sony to kick off this week's episode of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. Moving on, though, we do have some releases coming out this week. Our weekly releases. Decided another new segment to kick off every episode. Just a quick rollout of all the major releases coming out this week. The beginning of the month, I do it for the entire month. If there's any releases that are worth noting in multiple numbers, which I'm sure this month in particular there will be, I'll just set aside some time to clarify them and just let you know what's coming out this week. As far as this week, though, we have 3 major releases. I know in Colin Moriarty's podcast, I believe they do, like, every single week they come out with the list of every single game that comes out this week. And if you know the PlayStation Store, you know that 98% of it is just full on shovelware. Just games that are so low that don't even get any, like, the PSN store is just flooded with a bunch of unknown games. And I've decided if I do make a list of the games that are coming, it's just going to be any just big substantial ones, plus any ones that I'm personally interested in. It would take quite a bit to announce just because I'm sure this week there's a bunch of games, a bunch of small games that come out every week along with the big ones. I just tend to focus on the major ones that I'm sure most people will have at least heard of. But as far as the 3 games, though, starting on the 16th, which I believe is tomorrow, we've got Starlink Battle for Atlas. That's that Ubisoft game that's it's kind of like Star Fox, except it's one of those games that comes with like physical accessories that you build that appear in the game. It's kind of like Disney Infinity or Skylanders. Well, Ubisoft is doing one of those games, and this is the first time that a major publisher is kind of dipping their toes into that type of game. I do know that those type of games are very popular amongst like younger crowds. So there goes a nice market for Ubisoft to release this game in. I know the Switch version has actually, speaking of Star Fox, they have actual Star Fox levels and Star Fox the character included in there as well. So if you're a Star Fox fan, it's funny because the the footage itself actually, and the levels themselves actually look much better than the previous Star Fox games. I know there's that one for the Wii U that was reviewed horribly. I'm not really that big into Star Fox, but I remember it reviewing very horribly. And this, what's it called? Starlink Battle for Atlas does include some Star Fox type gameplay or Star Fox levels. I'm not too sure actually, but it's worth looking into if you're into that type of game. So that's Starlink Battle for Atlas out the 16th. And also coming out on the 16th is Dark Souls for the Switch, or Dark Souls Remastered for the Switch. It's already been out for the PS4 and Xbox One and the PC, but the Switch port is now out. So there you go for anybody that wants to praise the sun now on the go. Which, by the way, it might just be because I'm nowhere, I'm not anywhere near a college campus. I don't go to school. I haven't really gone to anywhere where a bunch of young people interact like in a school setting. But I've personally I don't really see people out and about with Switches in their hands. The only time I've ever seen it, I believe I was having dinner with my girl at a Red Robin, and there was a table nearby with a family, and one of the kids had like this, what I assumed was a Switch, which upon further inspection was indeed a Switch. And they look a lot bigger in real life than they do on TV. I'm sure it's not easy carrying those, you gotta, because they certainly don't fit in your pocket. I remember, it makes sense, a DS. I take my DS to school all the time. It just fit right in just a fat bulge of DS in my pocket. But a Switch, I'm wondering if he had his mom carry it for him, because that's not really it's a portable system, but I don't know what I'm trying to get to, but the point is I don't see many Switches out in public, but I'm sure that's just because I'm nowhere near any high schools or colleges. But that's just one of my observations. And finally, coming out the 19th, which I believe is a Friday, Soul Calibur 6, the long-running fighting game from Bandai Namco, the makers of Tekken, is coming out on Friday. Good for any Soul Calibur fans out there. Soul Calibur is a fighting game franchise that I never really got into. I do know that it's one of those weapon-based fighting games. And it's pretty cool that one of their main guest characters is Geralt from the Witcher series. They actually went as far as to put him on the cover as well. So Geralt from The Witcher is a playable character in Soul Calibur 6. So that's coming out on the 19th. Any Soul Calibur fans out there, your day is coming out Friday. And that does it for all the substantial releases for this week. But of course, and this completely blows my mind, it relates to how fast time is flying. We're already past mid-October. I feel like October just started. I feel like I've just made the first October episode talking about how excited I am that October is starting, and here we are almost at the end of it. And the thing that blows my mind the most is that one of the most anticipated games ever comes out next week, and that's Red Dead Redemption 2. I think it's finally time to start our Red Dead Redemption 2 countdown here on the DualShock Graveyard podcast. I'm very excited for it. It's my most, I don't want to say my most anticipated game of the year. That was God of War, but that came and went. And then after that, it might have actually been Spider-Man, but that came and went too. But my number 3 most anticipated game of 2018 comes out next week. It just snuck right onto us. I'm still shocked that it's next week, because I kept reminding, it's coming out the end of the month. Well, the end of the month is basically here. And here we are at the dawn of the release of Red Dead Redemption 2. And I said this in previous episodes, I'm done with looking at anything, like any new footage of the game. I'm just done. I don't want anything. I don't need to know anything else. I've practically been sold since the day that it was announced. So I'm good with any more footage. I don't have the game I stopped pre-ordering games a long time ago. Um, I've usually always been lucky enough to call the day games come out and just say, I'll call GameStop or what have you and say, is there a copy for people that haven't pre-ordered? And most of the time they do have a spare copy. So, and there aren't really many pre-order incentives that really interest me. I don't buy any those premium editions of games that just come with like a bunch of dolls and action figures and different shenanigans like that. I typically, if I buy a game physically, which I do buy all of my games when I can physically because I do like collecting, it's usually just the case, maybe a booklet inside, and of course the disc. I miss the booklets that come in game cases. Like back in the PS2 and PS3 eras, there'd be like a thick booklet that came with every game, and now it really did just start with the PS4, Xbox One era that they just stopped doing that. I believe they have the digital booklet, which makes no sense. I don't look into any of that. I believe Ultimate, or not Ultimate, but actually no, there is. I think the last PS4 game that had a legit booklet was the original Evil Within. And just seeing that brought me back. It's like a fat booklet. It had like, aside from the warranty stuff, it had like a synopsis of the game, character descriptions, location, how to play. You remember those booklets. Let's bring the booklets back for old time's sakes. Let's get people reading again. That's all I have to say about that. Let's move on to the first details of the Spider-Man DLC. Their season pass includes many games. These publishers are getting really confusing with their season passes. So Spider-Man, the season pass itself has a title. It's Spider-Man: The City That Never Sleeps, which would confuse people to thinking that that's the name of just one piece of DLC. But no, that's the name of the season pass. And that comes with 3 pieces of DLC. And the first one comes out the 23rd, which I believe, looking at my calendar, is next Tuesday. Red Dead Week. I don't know if that's good timing. No, I'm sure people aren't just gonna not play Red Dead to play Spider-Man. But anyway, the first piece of DLC, entitled The Heist, comes out on PS4, Xbox One, or not. Spider-Man was a PS4 exclusive. It's only coming to PS4. And the DLC also includes 3 new suits. I've always been a fan of the different suits of every Spider-Man game. That's one of my favorite things about Spider-Man games are the different suits that you get to collect. And I've seen the 3 suits. Nothing unfortunately too interesting. The only costume that I need in my life is the black suit, which I'm sure the Venom angle isn't going to be explored until they're not just going to devote the Venom angle into a piece of DLC. I mean, we might have to wait until the next Spider-Man game to see the full Venom angle of the Spider-Man's of Insomniac's Spider-Man series. But the original Spider-Man suit from the Tobey Maguire movies, also known as the Raimi suit, is one that I've been hoping. It's one that a lot of people want, and that's definitely one that we're not getting at this DLC, but perhaps the next 2. There's still 2 more, so there's a good chance that the remaining 6 unannounced costumes will be the Raimi suit. I'm still, however, a little salty about how they went about announcing this DLC. They announced this before the game even came out, not just the season pass, which in itself isn't really I don't have an issue. It's when they start detailing the DLC and including images of characters of the DLC. Before the original game even launched, they released a picture of Black Cat, who is a popular Spider-Man character, of course. And when they released that picture, they said that she was going to be a part of the DLC and not part of the game that hadn't even been released yet, which was I mean, in my opinion, not really a smart move. If they would have waited until now that the game has been out in the wild for long enough, many people have finished it, platinumed it, including myself, by the way. I recently was able to finally platinum the game. Finally. I mean, it's not that difficult of a platinum to get. The most tedious part was finishing up those random street crimes. You have to complete a certain number of crimes within each district. And that took quite a bit. It was just finding time to do it was the thing. But I finally platinumed it. And my point being that now that I'm done with everything in the game, they should have waited until now that it's been out long enough to start, showing off pictures of the DLC. Like if I would have seen that picture of Black Cat now, I would have been completely hyped as opposed to the non-hype from when they released it before the game came out, because when they did that, the picture was just muddied by not even knowing what's going to be in the game, the vanilla version of the game. Like, for example, I didn't even know who was going to be in the game to begin with. I don't want to spoil the game. I'm not going to spoil the game, but all the characters that were revealed, knowing that Black Cat wasn't going to be in it, but also not knowing who else was going to be in it, it kind of deflated the hype for what could have been that. But if they would have released it now that I know everything about the game, then I could have been like, holy shit, finally, Black Cat's going to be in the game. Hell yeah. But they did announce the DLC details way too early, in my opinion. But the first piece of that DLC is coming out next week on the 23rd. I'm most likely going to purchase the Season Pass. I don't very often buy Season Passes, only for the games that I really enjoyed, and I definitely enjoyed Spider-Man, so I'll be buying the Season Pass just to save a bit of money. This piece of DLC by itself is $10. You can get it individually, or you could just buy the entire Season Pass, which I believe is $25. So you'll be saving $5 in total, because I assume that just like this one, the other two are going to be $10 as well. So 25 versus 30, save yourself $5 and get the Season Pass if you want to. I certainly will. Moving on to a story that would have kicked off this episode. I would have talked about this at the very top. But this particular problem has been solved, but I feel like it's still worth discussing. And it might even I might even throw some tips on how to avoid this if it ever does become an issue again in the future. So over the weekend, there was an issue where this story blew up on Reddit. Apparently there was a message going around the PS4 ecosystem, and apparently the message was kind of I believe it was like a cryptic code embedded in the message that if you receive it, even upon receiving it, had the ability to crash your PS4. And this put a lot of people on edge, and literally everyone that has a PS4 connected to the internet was advised to put their messages in private, which I did as soon as I heard about this. Shoutouts to Robin Gaming. He was the first person to where I heard this about, and then upon doing research, I found out that it was blowing up on Reddit. So again, the problem has been resolved. I think Sony, they didn't put out a new system update or anything. I think they just squashed the actual message. I'm not sure what the solution was, but apparently we've been given the all clear. However, though, this did make me, I put it on private upon hearing this, but I didn't put it back to everyone. I think if to avoid things like this and you just want to stay on the safe side, I would recommend changing your privacy to not private, but just keep it so that only your friends can send you messages. I'll add anyone, on Twitter. I'll be friends with anybody, but this is just me personally. I tend to want to keep my PS4 friends list just to the people that I know. And just to stay on the safe side in case anything like this ever happens again, I just have it set to only my friends can send me messages. I would recommend you do that as well. I mean, you're certainly welcome to do what you want, even to set it to complete private or not set it at all, but just to stay on the safe side and perhaps prevent a situation like this happening again and having it affect you, I would just have your privacy settings as far as messages to just the people you know. And in case you don't know how to do it, I just wrote it down. I figured it might. So you just go into your settings, and then you go to account management. From there, you go to privacy settings. From there, you enter your password. You can manage your personal info and your messaging and set it to either everyone can send you a message, only your friends can send you a message, and of course, completely private to no one can send you messages. So that was quite the thing that happened this weekend. I'm glad that this issue was resolved. Kudos to those tech people over there at Sony for fixing the issue. And we move on. In news that we already knew this was coming. This is kind of the home stretch of this generation. We knew that Microsoft already announced that they're working on the next generation of consoles. We assumed Sony was doing the same, and we finally have confirmation coming from Sony that they are indeed working on a next generation PlayStation, which I can only assume, given the history and just, taking a wild guess, it will be called the PlayStation 5. The PS5, just like the iPhones, just go up a number. It worked. It worked for them. They they set themselves up to never have to think of the name for the next one. Unlike Microsoft, they went from Xbox to Xbox 360 to Xbox One. God knows what they're gonna name it. It's a guessing game what they could name it, but PlayStation does not have that issue, which thank goodness for all of us. But they did confirm, actually, Kenshiro Yoshida of Sony confirmed in an interview. They didn't name it, so they didn't announce. It wasn't an announcement, but it was just a confirmation saying, quote. Actually, I have a quote. At this point, what I can say is it's necessary to have next gen hardware. So there you go. We knew this already, but it's good to actually hear some sort of confirmation from the higher ups at Sony. Many people are anticipating, including myself, just speculating that 2020 will be the launch year, which is actually very smart. Just start at the birth of the new decade. It's much easier to keep track of game releases, game times. Just release it at the beginning of the decade. Man, we're talking decades now. It's already 2020. I still remember 2006. Even before that, I remember 9/11. I don't want to get too diverge too far, but I remember being in the 3rd grade when 9/11 happened, and I remember most of that day pretty vividly. And now it's almost we're at the dawn of a new decade, past the last decade. So not even 2012, we're at 2020 now. That's pretty. We're still 2 years down, but almost 1 year. I mean, we're already at October. It's just one more year until a new decade starts. Blows my mind. And we move on. So this isn't new news. This is something that Microsoft announced a couple weeks ago, which got me thinking, and I prepared myself a little rant for everybody because this does affect the future of the industry. They announced an initiative, Xbox, Microsoft, on cloud gaming and streaming games, which is already a thing right now on the PS4. The service PlayStation Now does allow you to stream games, and that kind of is where I bring my point on this. If you've ever used the actual system, you would know that the service runs like complete crap. I'm not sure if it's improved since it came out, but I remember, I think it was the end of last year, I tried to download, I don't even think they do it this way anymore, but you used to be able to rent games on a not day by day, but like on, for a week or something. I think it's a full-blown subscription now, kind of like Netflix. And I remember downloading Twisted Metal because that's one of my favorite PS3 games ever. It was Twisted Metal, the remake. Just hoping that they had fixed, the online. Just wanted to play some Twisted Metal online on my PS4 because, the game's not remastered or anything, and the only way to play it is on this service without, hauling out the PS3, obviously. But yeah, I did download Twisted Metal and it ran like complete garbage. It was laggy, and I have, if I do say so myself, I have great internet. I have a good modem. I have the up-to-date Comcast modem. I have high-speed internet. My internet's great, but it just ran like garbage, and I didn't enjoy myself, and that was $3 down the drain. And it's then that I figured that game streaming was not for me. And we haven't really seen any advances in this technology as far as streaming games. And I'm just not interested in streaming games. I prefer to just buy a game, either physically, which I do. I download most of my games, or if I do purchase digital games, I can still just buy them and download them right into my hard drive. But streaming games is not something that I would just enjoy. Just knowing that there's a possibility that the game won't run as well as it should just kind of turns me off from that completely. I would much rather just download the game onto my hard drive and just play it off there with no latency issues and just, having it run the way it should. So when I hear that Microsoft is trying to advance on this initiative to stream games, and it's not just streaming games, this is what they're doing. It's called the Project X Cloud, and what they're trying to do is not just stream games from, I don't know, I'm assuming that it's from it'll be onto their next console, but they're also trying to stream games from PCs, phones, and tablets. So essentially, you'll be able to play, Halo on your tablet with a controller. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I've seen it's kind of like a little promo of, what's to come in the future. I believe someone was playing I don't know if it was Halo, but it was some first-person shooter, but they were playing it on the tablet, like on the actual screen. That makes no type of sense at all. First of all, are you trying to tell me that you can run a next-gen game on a tablet, like just the way it is? I mean, I wouldn't assume so, but there's the footage of some guy playing a next-gen game right on the tablet. I mean, there's also the option to, use a controller, but even then, I mean, can an iPad run a demanding game like a next-gen game, like a new Halo or a new Gears, or certainly the new Forza, which is, I mean, credit where credit's due. Forza Horizon 4 is one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen. I mean, I just have to credit where credit is due. They really did a good job at that one. But I mean, if you've seen footage of Forza Horizon 4, you would have to question as well if this beast of a game could even run on a tablet. So I'm interested in seeing what they're trying to do with this. To hear more details on this, will it succeed? I mean, it's just whether or not people are interested in streaming their games. I mean, I certainly am not interested in streaming games. I mean, I've already tried my hand on it, and obviously, as time goes on, technology improves. So if you can guarantee, until you can guarantee that you can stream a game and have it feel as if it's been downloaded right into your console, and I mean to a T, because any amount of latency issues that you can detect can just completely blow the immersion and will just ruin everything. And just knowing that that's a possibility just turns me off completely. I would much rather just play a game that's been downloaded into my hard drive, and just play it from there. Which brings me to this next piece of old news, as a matter of fact. PlayStation Now, which is the service that I was talking about a second ago, PlayStation's hand at streaming, they're actually now introducing the option to download PlayStation Now games right onto your PS4 and PC, which is kind of the opposite, really, of what Microsoft is doing. So PlayStation, they dipped their toes in first in this whole streaming thing, and it's not. I mean, aside from just my experiences, just in general, if you like look up videos, people are just not satisfied with how it is now. It's very laggy, latency issue up the ass, and so to remedy that, PlayStation now is introducing the option to download games. So it is kind of the opposite of what Microsoft is doing. They have a similar service, not backwards compatibility, but you actually have a service on Xbox called Xbox Game Pass, which for $10 a month you can download a whole plethora of games. Like just download them. And now they're moving on to into a stream-based future, which I'm sure they're going to keep the downloading option, but Sony went from streaming to downloads now, so it's kind of a contradictory thing going on both sides. But that is good news as far as the downloads on PS Now, because I've always said that Xbox had the upper hand as far as Game Pass, simply on the notion that you could just download all the games that you see on the service. But PS Now does, if you ever get a even if you're not subscribed to it, you can still go into it and look at the catalog of games that they have to offer, and it's a pretty neat catalog. I mean, let me as a matter of fact, I'm actually the TV's muted, so you won't hear it, but I'm just gonna go through the catalog right now and just give you an example of what they have to offer. I do believe it's $20 a month, but like I said, it's all streaming, and this streaming just sucks ass. But here we go. I'm on the actual app itself, which, again, if you do have a PS4 with an internet connection, you can just explore this catalog at your own leisure without even having a subscription. But just off the bat, there's Red Dead Redemption, Bloodborne. They do have PS4 games on here as well. The Elder Scrolls Online, Mafia 2, a whole bunch of PS3 games. Mortal Kombat 9, which is my favorite Mortal Kombat, the PS3 one. Borderlands 2, BioShock, just a really massive, good library. I mean, they have the PS3 Yakuza games, which isn't out for the PS4 yet. If you don't want to wait for Yakuza Kiwami 3 or Yakuza Kiwami 4 or 5, they have the Yakuza games. I just see Yakuza 5. I'll look real quick if they have. I won't, but they have Yakuza, the PS3 Yakuzas on PS Now. If they went the route of Xbox Game Pass and allowed downloading of all these games, oh, without question, this is a much superior service to Game Pass. Only for that reason. Game Pass allows you to download games. That is the only thing giving it the upper edge, because the library of games that I'm like looking at right now is, I mean, it's almost making me want to. No, I'm not gonna spend $20 a month for this. But for those of you that are inclined, I mean, Catherine, they have Catherine. They have. Okay, here we go. Now we're at the anime section. Whole bunch of waifu simulators now. There you go, another incentive. There goes Twisted Metal. Broke my heart. I tried to play that on this service. It just ran like ass. But this massive library of games, which probably all run like shit because it's a streaming service and not a basically the Netflix of. Well, actually, Netflix is streaming, so that's a bad analogy. But Xbox Game Pass allows you to download their library of games. PS Now does not. PS Now has the superior library, but it's all streaming. So we do have this news that they are introducing downloads on select PS4 and all PS2 games, or select PS4 and select PS2 games, sorry. So it's limited so far, but this is a step in the right direction with what they are doing. Here's my prediction on the PS5. I think this is setting up full, not backwards compatibility, which, by the way, as great as these services are, none of it will ever be more superior than complete backwards compatibility, which is what Microsoft has on Xbox, and that's one of the solid bullet points that Microsoft has over Sony as far as the consoles, is the ability to play Xbox 360 games on your Xbox One. That is, I mean, not just that, but a lot of them have enhancements if you're playing them on the Xbox One X. For example, Red Dead Redemption 2 they've upscaled it. I think it runs at 4K now if you're using backwards compatibility to play it on the Xbox One X, which is pretty cool. But I lost my train of thought. I was talking about backwards compatibility in regards to the edge that it has over PlayStation. But as far as Xbox's Game Pass versus PS Now, I think this move by Sony to introduce native downloads is, I predict, they're setting up full download implementation once the PS5 comes out with the entire catalog of PS Now games, which, if they do that, it will finally be a worthy competitor to Xbox Game Pass, which is very exciting. You know, it's exciting to see these two companies, which, by the way, I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? I give Microsoft slack every once in a while because of their decisions as far as their exclusives and what the path that they're doing as far as like the Play Anywhere initiative, where you play all of their exclusives are no longer exclusive, basically. If they're on PC, which they are on, the next Halo, the next Gears, all the current Forzas are not just on Xbox, but they're also on PC as well, which, I mean, some could argue that since they're being released on PC, they're being released on Microsoft's platform, which is the Windows Store. You know, some people could say, well, I mean, it's still in the Microsoft ecosystem, but when you're talking about it in the context of PlayStation and Xbox, that Play Anywhere initiative doesn't help Xbox at all. It'll help Microsoft as a whole because it's still being released on their platforms. But as I said before, if this next Halo game, for example, Halo Infinite, Halo 6, what have you, if this game comes out and I can play it on my PC, I can buy it, download it, or run it on my computer without even ever having to utter the word Xbox once, that's significant. And I know I'm reiterating a point I made a couple episodes ago, but it's worth repeating because that's a really significant factor if we're discussing the quote-unquote console war. You know, you look at the God of War or the Spider-Man cases, right on the very top it says only on PlayStation. And those labels, being that those games are only exclusives to PlayStation and only PlayStation, that's the reason why people buy consoles, are because of the exclusives. Exclusives sell. Whether or not they're still as significant as, you know, they have been in the past, I mean, look no further than to just how successful the PS4 has been selling. You know, it's being projected that by the end of when it's all said and done, PlayStation will be among the top 5 best-selling consoles of all time. And, you know, surely it's because they have all these great exclusives that they've released and are still releasing. You know, take a look at what's left. I mean, they've already played their entire hand. I don't think there's any like surprise announcements as far as any substantial PS4 exclusives. Looking forward, though, we obviously have a giant one in The Last of Us Part 2. We've got Ghost of Tsushima. What else? Dreams. Which, by the way, after months and months of radio silence from Dreams, Media Molecules game, Dreams is actually the cover. It's the cover story, or it's the game of the month for Game Informer. So we're finally getting like a month's worth of coverage on this game. And I've always been interested in Dreams. I'm not really like the creative type as far as like creating things like they're the developers behind Little Big Planet. So I was never like the, you know, get behind the controller and like build levels, and I was never that type of creative person. But what I've seen so far, it looks really, really cool. It's like this surreal looking game. But yeah, we've got Dreams, and of course Death Stranding from Hideo Kojima as well on its way. I mean, just those 4 alone are going to continue to carry because they all look good. And of course, Days Gone, which comes out next November, which, you know, is another post-apocalyptic zombie game that looks pretty cool. That's, what is that, 5, I believe? Those 5 will continue to carry PS4's dominance forward. That's in itself is the reason why, the last E3 was kind of lacking. They canceled this year's PSX simply because, they've got nothing else to announce, because they're just going to continue to ride this wave of success that the PS4 is riding. And once 2019's over, maybe even the first half of 2020, but they're certainly going to announce the next the next PlayStation in 2020. So, going back to the original point of this whole rant, is that with PS4, or with Sony rather, keeping this strategy, this is the strategy that's going to keep them successful in the future. Now, we are seeing Microsoft make some moves. Last E3, one of their biggest announcements was their acquisition and creation of 4 or 5 new studios, which is a step in the right direction, of course. One of the many complaints that many consumers have regarding Microsoft is that they aren't releasing any mini games. Their last substantial exclusive was the recently released Forza Horizon 4, which reviewed very well, and benefits Microsoft. You could say it benefits Xbox as well, but as I don't want to beat a dead horse as far as the whole, is it a real exclusive if it's also available on PC, and does it benefit Xbox? I don't want to drag on that discussion, but what I ultimately want is, I want these two companies to, be on par with each other. I want them to keep each other on their toes, because when we have a competing a competitive ecosystem like that, we get a lot of consumer friendly practices, we get a lot of good games, and we just get overall greatness coming from these two companies. So that's something to look forward to as far as we end this generation, which, I'm saying it like it's close. We still have 2 years to go, but hopefully some good things to look forward to once that time does come, though. But in the meantime, we still have our PS4s or what have you. I really want to Switch, though. I was at a party this weekend, and we played a Super Mario Party for the Switch. I really need to get a Switch, and I had a blast playing it. The mini games were really creative. It blows my mind how, after all these Mario Party games, they're still able to make these creative mini games that very rarely will you find two. Just in the span of all the games that they've come out, you'll very rarely find two that are similar. It's these really creative mini games that were a lot of fun to play. So, along with a PlayStation 4 and a PC as well, I hope to add a Switch in there as well. I still haven't played Super Mario Odyssey, and that sucks too. But as we draw this episode to its to a close, we still have about 10 minutes till an hour, and I do plan on keeping my commitment of keeping, from here on out, having at least 1 hour long episodes. One of the things that worried me about that, but also seemed like a fun challenge for myself, again, I do put challenges to myself so I can improve, is the fear of running out of shit to talk about and then having to still entertain the crowd, you guys. It's a very fun challenge to set upon myself. I'm not to say that I'm hitting that right now. I actually still want to close out by laying out the future of the show and my plans, and how you, the listener, can be involved in that as well. It's funny, I keep there's a mirror across the room in which I keep finding myself looking into, and just seeing myself talk into this this microphone that I purchased. It's a nice it's kind of, it's a cliche mic. It's one of those it's got a stand, it's got I'm so new to this thing. It's got the puff ball, the puff that covers the mic, and then it's got that that flat piece of film that hovers over it, like you see like rappers like rap into. It's got that as well. And I can't help but just like, be excited that I finally built myself a nice little corner of the room in which I can do these podcasts in. It's a very exciting feat. In between episodes, I'm not just I'm doing a lot of research for the show, but I'm also continue to build upon the foundation and help it grow. I remember the very first episode that I did. I had no equipment. I used my phone's voice. I had to download an app, just a voice recording app, just to record it. The podcast didn't even have a name yet. I believe you can go back and listen to it. It would be to your detriment. It's a very sloppy podcast, which it'll be fun to listen to once I'm 100 episodes in to see how it all started. But the time between the first episode and the second episode was just a whole bunch of scrambling, coming up with a name, submitting the podcast to all these different sites, paying for a service to host everything, and just a whole bunch. And I think last week's episode and the time between that to now has been another rush to get a whole bunch of equipment together. I actually challenged myself, I think it was last episode, to make sure I had a mic before the end of this month. Speaking of microcosmic challenges I set forth myself, not just making this podcast an hour long, but also getting a mic. It's good to set challenges for myself so that to show, not just to you out there, the listener, but to just myself, to prove myself, to prove how committed I am to this podcast. And I am very, very committed. These past 5 weeks have been an absolute blast to record. I didn't think I'd be having this much fun. I knew I was going to be, particularly the first couple episodes, I was going to be, a little timid, a little nervous. But no, I'm blown away at how comfortable I've been getting as I record these podcasts, which is a very good thing. I'm very much looking forward to the future of the show. And I do want to spend the last couple minutes here discussing to any new listeners out there what I intended this podcast to be. So throughout this whole hour, we've been talking about the latest and greatest in the world of gaming. But when I started this podcast, I wanted it to be that at its core. But aside from also being a fan of gaming, I'm also a giant fan of the horror genre. I am very much a fan of horror movies, of looking up creepy shit, watching creepy TV shows, and just a fan of the horror genre in general. I mean, it's kind of difficult to describe of the type of, well, not the type of horror that I'm into, but just why the actual phenomenon of horror intrigues me. I think some of it has to do with what being scared does to me, and just my interest in what it does to the actual human body, just like absolute paralyzed in fear. I mean, obviously, not to any. I mean, I've had a few traumatic experiences in my life, and that's not what I'm trying to. That's not what I'm getting at it either. It's just just a fun, I guess, for lack of a better words, fun horror. Like just being scared as a hobby, basically, has always been something that intrigued me, and I've been having trouble implementing horror thematics to the show, which I've decided that one of the few ways I can do that, which is why I recommend, if you do decide to listen to the DualShock Graveyard podcast on YouTube, I recommend subscribing to the show on YouTube, like the actual channel that it's hosted on, because I've decided that is where I am going to make exclusive web content for the show on there. And I think about what I can make, what type of content I can make, and that's really where I can start showcasing. I don't know if showcasing is the right word, but just really implementing the show as well. Definitely part of that will be recording instead of just how it is right now, which is just like it's just the logo with the show playing in the background, but actually have a studio set. And actually, I don't know if it would still be live or not, but definitely I can edit the show and just basically just broadcast the show as a recorded podcast and upload it. You know, make a set, make it look cool, have a nice spooky atmosphere, make it graveyardy, you know, just make the actual theme of what I feel like this show could be and bring it to life, and just marry the two worlds of gaming and horror into one show. And just, you know, that's a work in progress as well. That's one of my macrocosmic visions for the show. I do want to start wrapping up here. I do want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to check this show out. I am Julian, your host. I didn't say that in the beginning. But again, on the off chance that you're not listening to this podcast on your preferred platform, we are, once again, let me get the complete list here. Give me a sec. Where you at? We are on, actually, it's right here. Oof. How unprofessional of me. We are on iTunes. We are on Spotify. We are on Google, SoundCloud, brand new on YouTube, which starting with this episode, will have timestamps included in case you want to skip around to different subjects. And also while you're there, subscribe to the channel that it's being hosted on, because that is where all future web exclusive content, including the future version of the recorded version of this podcast, will be very soon. That's also a work in progress. The official, I want to say, communication hub of the show is my Twitter. That is the only place where I communicate with the listeners. I do appreciate all of you who have sent feedback. A lot of very kind words, a lot of advice, some harsh criticism, which I've always said I do welcome. I enjoy, well, not enjoy, but I do respect where some of you are coming from as far as the criticism. You do need criticisms in your life to know what you do need to improve on. You need some outside guidance. So to all of you reaching out, leaving, DMing me, mentioning me, I don't know the lingo, but I do appreciate all of that. The show is, of course, still a work in progress. I'm still, I don't want to say getting comfortable, because I am getting comfortable, but as each episode goes on, I do become more used to this whole thing. I'm still finding my voice, so to speak. So, again, coming soon to the podcast will be, the next big thing, rather, is I will be live streaming I guess you could say I'll be live streaming the process of recording this podcast, if that makes sense. Maybe in the future, once this whole thing starts becoming second nature, maybe we can finally start moving on to some live podcasts and just one full cut with maybe never a studio audience, but, you know, viewership. Until then, though, I'll still be, once this Twitch thing does come together, it will be you all, if you so choose to watch me stream. You'll be watching me record the podcast and discuss amongst yourselves in the not comment section, but listen, I sound like such a novice right now, but I've always been a fan of the Twitch platform, and that's where I've got my eyes on next for the DualShock Graveyard podcast. But until then, I do appreciate each and every one of you for listening. If I am missing any what's the word, platforms for, like, if the show is not in your preferred platform, let me know, and I'm always looking to expand platforms for the show. I do believe I am in all the major ones, but if there's one that you're only comfortable listening on, send me a DM and I'll be more than happy to add my RSS feed to that platform. And as much as this is my show, this is also your show. So again, keep sending me your mentions, your DMs. If I miss any games that are worth discussing as far as like, you know, the weekly releases, let me know and I'll be sure to include them. At least give them a shout out on the next episode. But until then, though, I do thank all of you for listening. I am Julian, your host, and this has been episode 5 of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I won't see you, but I will speak to you guys next week. Peace.